Patch 14.13 didn't have a lot of support changes, except it dropped one of the best skins of all time. No, seriously, the chromas changed the expression of the frog in the hat, like that's crazy. Anyways, here's my support solo queue tier list for 14.13. The meta heavily revolves around champions that can utilize or counter Warmogs well. Engaged champs are going to be benefiting the most as they have lots of resistances or scaling off of max HP built into their kit. I have a quick summary of the Warmogs meta if you aren't in the loop that explains it all very quickly, so you can check it out here. As always, I'm going to go into detail on all the champs in B and above, starting with Maokai. Maokai has a great kit where he can reliably zone and engage for his team, but he's struggling this meta because he gets stat checked very hard. He can't compete with all the high tier engage supports that run Warmogs and have a lot of resistances because he doesn't have any himself. Also, because Warmogs is meta, his sapling zoning isn't as effective because supports can just tank them and regen all their health back. Xerath is one of the best counters to a lot of the meta enchanters because he's able to outrange most of them. He can completely make a lane unplayable in the right matchup, but the opposite is true for him in a bad matchup. Xerath is really bad into any type of hook or engage champs, and if he falls behind, he's pretty useless like any damage oriented support. He's great as a counter, but terrible as a blind. Zyra is really great in this Warmogs meta because she builds Liandry's, which is a direct counter to champions that build a lot of health. She still suffers the same problem as most support mages, but has a more flexible kit to deal with those issues a lot better. Even when she's behind, her plants provide a lot of zoning and lockdown potential, and her kit makes it a lot harder for engaged champs to go in. I think mages are in a pretty bad spot in the support role after the nerfs to Zezaks and gold reduction from a support item, but Zyra is still pretty decent. Renata is great if you have an auto heavy AD carry and you're playing against a heavy dive comp. With the right conditions, she can feel very strong, but she can also feel very useless if she doesn't have any setup. You could only pick her in specific drafts, but even then I feel like she's not that great of a solo queue champ. I think Renata is a lot better in a competitive setting where you can calm your teammates not to run away when you have W on them. Soraka is a champion that can solo carry games if she can stay alive or if the enemy doesn't build anti-heal. Unfortunately, engaged champs and anti-heal is very meta this patch, so she is struggling. I think her biggest problem is that Faded Ashes was introduced to the game. When you combine any damage over time item or ability with anti-heal, you can debuff champions with Grievous Wound for a long time, making Soraka very ineffective. You can basically shut Soraka down with just 1700 gold, and a lot of mages that build Liandry's are also super meta. Seraphine used to be a S tier support, but after they nerfed First Strike, she lost a lot of power. She's still pretty good though, as she has a lot of great CC, range, and damage. The strong point of Sarah support is that she is in between a mage and an enchanter, which she provides a lot of utility while having her own source of damage. Sarah is an okay blind because people can assume it's Sarah AD carry, but she has a lot of bad matchups into a lot of the meta hook champs. Overall strong champion that is great for solo queue. Nautilus is one of the champs that benefits well from Warmogs meta because his W has max health scaling. His CC and knockdown make him perfect for teams that lack engage, and he is one of the best picks into double range bot lanes. A lot of people say Nautilus is a good blind, but I disagree as any engaged champ with lots of resistances can easily stat check him. Unfortunately for Naut, all those champions are meta, so he is better as a counter. I always group Lulu and Melio because they function very similarly, and I feel like they are pretty close in strength. They shine the most when they are paired with a or multiple ranged auto attack carries where they can hyper buff and peel for them. Fortunately for them, a lot of those AD carries are meta in the bot lane and even in other lanes. With the popularity of champions like Tristana, Akshan, Twisted Fate, and Vayne in solo lanes, Lulu and Melio have a lot more opportunity to be great picks. I would not recommend them blind because they need a team to be built around them to be good. Although Zilean doesn't have anything that scales with HP, Warmogs has been a very popular item on him. Since he doesn't have any heals or shields, most enchanter items are pretty bad on him, and Warmogs allows him to get better angles for his low range abilities. Zilean is usually always pretty high tier because he has great CC and utility, and his ult is one of the most broken abilities in the game. He actually scales surprisingly well, but has a very weak early game. Blitzcrank got some pretty big nerfs these few patches, lowering him from the usual S tier to A. 50 health might not seem like a lot, but it makes a huge difference in the early game. Blitz is great into any type of double range bot matchup, but struggles a lot into the meta engage supports as he gets stat checked even more now after the nerfs. He is still a really solid champion that also builds Warmogs, and you can never really count him out in a game because he can always land that one game winning hook. Sona can hypercarry games if she's able to make it out of laning phase even or ahead. She is great into most enchanters because you go even most of the time, but she hard outskills almost all of them. Unlike Melio and Lulu, her kit works well with most champs, so she doesn't need setup from her team to be good, but she is a lot more dependent on having an enemy bot lane with low kill pressure. You should never blind pick Sona because if the enemy counters with any type of hyper aggro lane and jungle with a hook champ, the game will actually be unplayable. I like pairing Braum and Taric together because they do very similar things and need certain setup to really pop off. They are both great into hook champs and do really well into a lot of the engaged meta champs. If you pick them into the right draft, it feels like an easy win. On the flip side, you can never blind these champions because if you don't have any setup, you can also be completely useless. I feel like they are the melee tank versions of Melio and Lulu. Kicking off S, we have Bard. He can build anything, so he's naturally going to benefit from most support item metas, and Warmogs is one of them. Bard's strengths lie in his ability to roam and make big plays. His biggest weakness is that his laning phase is on the weaker side, but if you can get past that, he can create openings and timings that no other champion can. If mastered, he can solo carry games, and he doesn't really need any type of setup because of how versatile he is. Rakan doesn't have any special interaction with Warmogs, but is still a great item for his playstyle. He's one of the most mobile supports in the game, and rather than stat checking his opponents like most engaged supports, he outmaneuvers them. He has very solid CC and has a lot of sustain from healing from his Q. He struggles against champions that can outrange and deny him from engaging, but overall a solid champion that can find angles in most situations. Nami got huge buffs in 14.11 that made her very OP. I swear if her win rate wasn't dragged down by Lucian players, she would probably be nerfed by now. Nami is one of the most versatile enchanters because she has a lot of utility, healing, and CC, making her a great blind pick. If you guys are looking for a build, check out my Nami guide. I still think those runes and items are her best setup. Karma got one of the craziest buffs in 14.12, shooting her all the way up to S. The buffs on her shield makes it so that it no longer feels like it's win lane lose game. You actually scale pretty well with these changes, and if you pair her with Helia in Moonstone, her numbers are broken. Don't go for the AP build her as an enchanter to fully utilize the buffs. She's similar to Seraphine in that her strengths lie in her ability to enchant her teammates and have her own source of damage that is actually strong. In a meta where engaged supports are OP, Janna will naturally be strong because she is a direct counter to them. She can hard shut down those champions in lane and easily snowball a game to a win. Janna is also one of the best users of Helia, which is currently one of the strongest items in the game after its buff in 14.10. Janna is better as a counter pick, but I think she's so strong right now that you can blind her every game. She struggles into comps where the enemy outranges her and ones where she can't disengage anything. Poppy has been OP for forever, but she's even better now because like Janna, she counters a lot of engaged supports. On top of her playstyle benefiting from Warmogs, her Q has enemy max health scaling, so this meta is perfect for her. I think the most OP thing about Poppy is her base damage from her abilities. It feels like if you land one Q on a wall, it just insta-kills anytime during the laning phase. Poppy does have a hard time against range supports that outscale her, but you can always find a way to be useful with her CC and ult. Leona is one of the best champions that benefits from Warmogs because her W gives her lots of bonus resistances, making her insanely tanky. Warmog's Leona is OP because she can never get bursted initiating a teamfight, and she can walk away, heal up, and re-enter. She provides a lot for her team as she can face take anything and has a lot of CC. Her biggest weakness is her lack of range, making her early game laning vulnerable to bad matchups, but once she hits 6, she becomes fully online. Thresh is also another champion that benefits a lot from Warmogs because his souls give him armor, so the extra health goes a long way. He is also a great counter to engage champions because he can deny them with Flay and punish them with Q. I generally always have Thresh as S tier because I feel like his kit is perfect. All of his abilities can be used either defensively or offensively, and if you can utilize them to his fullest, there's nothing that can stop you. His biggest weakness is that he is hard to play as he has an infinite skill ceiling. Like mostly everyone in S, Alistar hugely benefits from Warmogs because when you combine the health and damage reduction from his R, he is actually unkillable. Alistar has one of the best and reliable CC chains as he can almost always guarantee a knockup on someone with flash WQ. He is also really good into the other engage supports as he can flex his combo to either engage or disengage. His biggest problem is that his range is relatively short when his flash is down, so he can get punished by champs that have long range. Pyke was buffed in 14.9 and ever since then he has been broken. He has a sink or swim playstyle where if he gets ahead he snowballs the game super hard, but if he's behind he's very useless. Pyke is one of the hardest champions to play well mechanically, but if you can master him you can do some pretty crazy things. He is easily one of the best champions to climb with in solo queue because he doesn't rely on his team that much to make plays. Finally, at the top we have Rell. She is one of the champions that benefits from Warmogs because she gains a lot of resistances from her passive and her shield scales off of percent HP. I feel like Rell has always been strong for most of the split, but this meta is peaking her even harder. Her strengths are in her AoE CC where she can create big openings for multiple people. Her biggest counters are Janna and Poppy, but even then I think she can play around their disengage with their flash Q. That concludes my tier list. I'm sure we will see nerfs to Warmog soon as it's being abused by a lot of champions.